take on an art project. I'm an illustration student here in Montreal, and today I'm gonna give you some tips relating to how to participate in an art contest / take on an art project or a more professional commission. I feel like the hardest thing about taking on an art project is saying yes. I feel like that's usually the scariest part. Fully trusting your abilities to commit to the project can be a little bit intimidating, especially in the first stages of your art career, and especially if you're just figuring out how to navigate the business side of things. So I'm going to give you some tips based on my own experience when it comes to taking on commissions and doing school projects, and how I combine those two things in order to carry out the project to term. It can definitely feel overwhelming when someone approaches you with their idea and asks if you would be willing to bring it to life for them, because they're already coming to you with some amount of trust, and they trust that you trust in your ability to visually represent what's in their head. So I feel like the more experience you have when it comes to art practice, the more projects you've successfully carried out, even if it was a school project, the fact that you were able to follow certain steps to bring it to completion will help you grow that confidence, and saying yes to projects is gonna become less and less scary because you're gonna already know that you are physically able to draw the thing. So yeah, first things first, I would say obviously have a bank of drawings, also known as a portfolio, so that it's easier for people to get a sense of what type of things you can and can't do, or the type of things that you might be able to figure out. For example, if your thing is doing drawings of animals or plants and somebody approaches you with a realistic portrait, are you going to be able to do that? And you should kind of have a sense of if you're able to or not. And if you don't, just try it out and see. Obviously, the more you practice, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, the better you'll be at it. That's another thing. Draw things you're interested in and that you would actually like to pursue. Obviously, when you're drawing something that you're passionate about, it's gonna come through and you're gonna put more love, more effort into it, and it's inevitably, holy shit, that word is hard, it's gonna show. And then eventually your portfolio is gonna be full of dog pictures, and then people are gonna come to you for dog drawings or whatever it is that you love drawing. And once you're a little bit more comfortable with your artistic ability, you can then take on paid commissions / enter into an art contest or take on a bigger project of some sorts. Now we're gonna get into the technicalities of taking on an art project. So you got the hardest part out of the way, you said yes to the project, now what? The first thing you're gonna wanna do is get a sense of what the project is about. If you're entering an art contest, there's usually going to be a set of guidelines that you have to read through. Make sure that you're staying within those parameters and not infringing on any rules, such as big things like copyright or smaller things like using the wrong color palette. Those are all things you have to start thinking about. If you're entering an art contest hosted by a brand, the brand is going to give you the guidelines as to what they're looking for. If a company's hiring you, then they're giving you their own set of rules of what you have to follow in order to carry out their vision. And if it's a customer, they're gonna come to you with their vision, their idea, and usually it's up to you to get them to be as specific as possible. So literally just get them to write out exactly what they want. And if they're not sure, if they're giving you too much free range, have them narrow it down as much as possible by having them look up their own keywords as to what they would be looking for on either Google or Pinterest or whatever, and ask them to pick out the first 3 images that pop out to them, because you might be looking the same exact keywords, but the 3 images that are sticking out to you might not be the ones that your client is envisioning. Very important to be on the same page from the start. Communication is really important if you're directly working with your customer customer or a company, because they're not really gonna want any surprises unless they give you like free range, which usually an art contest tends to be more in favor of. You have to make sure that you're disclosing any changes that you're making throughout the process to make sure that everything's still good to go, because you don't want to get to your final and have to make a whole bunch of changes and have to go all the way back to your mood board. No. So just make sure that you're moving forward in the right direction from the beginning phases. If it's a company or a brand, you want to be sure you do extensive research on everything related to that brand or that company. They're usually going to have something like a website where you can go and get a feel of what their vibe is, what their product looks like, what their social media presence is like, if they have any slogans, what type of advertising they're using, what their company values are. Once you've created your list of things that the brand, the company, or the customer is looking for, it's time to move on to visuals. You're gonna want to put together a mood board.
What's a mood board?
Basically, it's a visual representation of the vibe. Based on the keywords that you have surrounding your research, you might have made this in the form of a list or a mind map. You're gonna look up all the pictures relating to those keywords. You're gonna want to compile them on a board. That's why it's called a mood board. That's how you're going to start generating ideas on what your sketch is gonna look like. Maybe you're gonna start looking at compositions, figure out what elements you're gonna want to represent, and once the mood board is done, you're gonna want to move into the next phase, which is thumbnails. You're gonna want to get your rough ideas out. Thumbnails will almost always come as a natural result of your mood board, because you're gonna be so inspired, you're gonna want to grab a piece of paper and a pencil and just start sketching out ideas. You're gonna want to focus on externalizing your thoughts. You're going to sketch as much as you can. It doesn't matter if you start off with doing stick figures, just start getting the ball rolling. In this process, you're gonna figure out things that work, things that don't work. You're gonna start basically eliminating the things that don't look right, because maybe in your head something sounded brilliant, but then as soon as you put it on paper, it's not quite working out the way you had envisioned. And that's okay, it's part of the process. But you're definitely gonna wanna bring that idea from your head onto paper to basically test out if it's a good idea or a crap idea. It's very likely that out of 10 drawings, 7 of them are gonna be crap, but 3 of them are gonna have potential. Once you have these thumbnails, you're ready to move on to the next step, which is linears. So a linear is just a fancier term that us illustrators use when we talk about clean drawings. So you're gonna take the thumbnails that stick out to you the most, the ones that have the most potential, and you're going to either present them to the client, or if you are entering an art competition, you're intuitively going to try and figure out what the best fit for the project will be. Based on the client's feedback or your strong intuition, you're gonna pick your best one and you're going to start cleaning it up. At this point, you're gonna wanna go back into your guidelines and carefully read about the format of this project. So before you clean up your drawing, you're gonna wanna know what the final size of your canvas is gonna be. Very crucial. You're going to wanna measure out your paper or your canvas, and you're gonna wanna make sure that there's a little bit of bleed. If your canvas is 8 by 10, you're gonna wanna extend it to at least 8.5 by 10.5, because it's just gonna overall give you a cleaner crop. Just trust me, you're gonna want this. Sometimes the client is not going to specify this step, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Sometimes they'll send you a predetermined template to work in. They're also gonna give you a predetermined color palette. If that's the case, you're gonna wanna check if the final product is intended for print or for digital display, because if it's going to print, you're gonna most likely wanna work in CMYK, and if it's going to be a digital display, you're gonna wanna work in RGB. If it's not clear and you don't have an answer, you're gonna want to do both. In my personal experience, every time I started in RGB and had to convert to CMYK, I lost a lot. So learn from me and start working in CMYK and then convert to RGB. It's gonna be much easier, trust me. You're gonna want to make sure you have at least 300 dpi because it's a safe resolution to work in. You're gonna want to make sure that all those things are taken care of before you actually start cleaning up your drawing. This is where you're going to start to fix things like anatomy, tangents, perspective. You're gonna want to determine your composition, your line weight, anything that you have to kind of calculate, anything that needs to make sense, deal with it in this phase. Because trust me, if you don't do it in this phase, you're gonna suffer later on. So just take the time to debug your drawing before you move on to the rendering phase. This is not the most fun. It can be fun, but it's not as fun as when you're freely drafting up stuff, and it's not as fun as you're rendering. It's kind of like an in-between. It's like the problem solving phase. The best way to figure out if there are issues within your linear is to flip your canvas. If you're drawing something traditionally, take a picture with your phone and flip it, or hold your drawing up against the light and see, and if there's something wrong, you're gonna know. Take a step back from it, maybe get someone to come look at it, because a lot of times people will be able to point out a mistake if they see one, instead of you who's been looking at it for like a billion hours already. Someone who's just taking a look at it can point something out right away. Make sure you fix that before you move into the rendering phase, please. Once you're in the rendering phase, all the math is out of the way, so you can just focus on chilling,
putting on some music, putting on a movie,
whatever it is, and just grinding it out until the very end. This is usually like the chill part. This is the fun part. This is where you get to add in your light source. This is where you get to pick your colors,
unless they're already pre-established.
This is where you're gonna play around with some textures. You're gonna play around with some patterns. You're gonna explore, experiment, different ways of rendering. You should be having fun in this stage, and if not, maybe you should have not said yes to this project, unless it was a mandatory school project that you really couldn't get out of. But hopefully you try to make it fun. Once your drawing is finalized, it's time to submit it. If you're submitting it to an art contest, there's usually going to be a button where you're gonna wanna upload your file. Sometimes there's going to be a little description box where you get to talk a little bit about your piece, your inspiration, your art process, things like that. Little notes when submitting. This is where you have to get a little bit creative again and just enhance your words in order to have them match up with your drawing. This is where you're gonna give your client a sense of who you are as an artist. Maybe they're gonna get a little feel about what you're like as a person. This is also the part where you're gonna want to name your file something more professional. Don't just leave it as like a random number off your camera roll or your scanner, whatever.
001 final whatever.
This is where you're gonna want to do something more professional, like your Instagram tag or your first and last name, underscore what the project was, if it had a name, or if it's for an art contest, maybe put like art contest. You know, just put a little bit of effort into this part. It's gonna go a long way. In school, we usually have like a designated naming convention, and that's usually gonna be your first and last name underscore the class or the semester number underscore the title of the project. I don't know if all that's in the right order, but you get it. Like, it's the most essential information about this project so that people know what they're opening. Make sure you double check everything before submitting, and I mean everything. Make sure it's in the right format. If they ask for a JPEG, make sure it's not a TIFF. Make sure it's not like 50 megabytes. Make sure that everything is aligning with initial guidelines, and there should be no reason as to why your client wouldn't be happy with it. I hope this helped. If you already knew all this stuff and you have even better advice, I hope you let me know, because I am still learning. This is what I've learned so far, and I'm just trying to help you guys out a little bit, because I didn't know any of this stuff before I went into art school. So these are like the technicalities that you don't see a lot of people talking about, but they're ever so real within your art career. I hope this gives you a little bit more confidence when it comes to saying yes to taking on a commission or a project that might seem like a big deal to you, or entering an art competition or anything of that sort. I hope that you say yes to more projects and you, I don't know, succeed as an artist. Let me know what you want me to talk about next, and yeah, I'll see you again sometime soon. I don't know when, but soon.